If you bought your FoMoCo modules from a third party, then your FoMoCo kit is going to come with the following items. First is a bag just full of stickers that we're going to put all over the modules to help us identify them. Second is going to be 5 of these EPDM adhesive rubber gaskets that we're going to put on the bottom. That's a safety electrical thing. And then the third thing is going to be 5 separate PCBs. Now, if you look at these PCBs, you'll notice there's 2 differences here. On one of them, the connector is on this side, and on the other one, the connector is on that side. So looking closer at these 2 different PCBs, if you look, one of the PCB types, the connector doesn't have any text on it, and on the other type, it does. So if you're only using a 48S configuration, which would be 4 FoMoCo modules, then the first thing you're gonna do is you're gonna take one of the 2 PCBs that has the text here, and the connector is on that side, and you're gonna just get rid of that because we don't use that with the 48S configuration. If you're using 60S, then you'll use all of these PCBs. The first thing we need to do with these modules is make sure they're all the same capacity. So if you look on these modules, they're gonna have a nameplate here that tells you their capacity. And unfortunately, some of them tell it to you in kilowatt hours and some of it tell it to you in amp hours. The 47 amp hour modules that I've seen tell you that they're 2.07 kilowatt hours. And then there's another type here, which is 49.5 amp hours. You cannot, I repeat, you cannot mix the 2 different module types. So if you have 49.5 amp hour ones and then others that say 2.07 kilowatt hours, they will not work together. Do not put them in your car. You are wasting your time. We need to remove all of the heat sinking gasket that came with these modules. Some of them will have a bunch more than this. Most of them won't have it left, but you need to remove all of it from the bottom here. So to remove this, I'm using 91% rubbing alcohol. I'm just gonna take a cloth here and gonna just run this. You don't need to get it all out of these gaps here, but you do need to clean it up pretty good. Once we finish, we have this really dirty rag. The oily adhesive that's on here has saturated this cloth, so we need to use a new cloth for each of the modules as we clean it. And one thing, unfortunately, you might find, because the bottom of these modules is so susceptible to damage, because this is literally the cell here, is that your modules might be damaged. So if after you've cleaned this all off, you notice that there are gashes like this is unsafe here. This would be incredibly dangerous to put in your car. If the aluminum outer foil here is punctured, then the lithium inside will actually react with air, and it can actually and will certainly eventually catch on fire if it's exposed to air. So this module right here is not usable. If you put this module in your car with a gash like this, it could fail at any time and burn your car to the ground. So other things that you'll get will be dents. This module doesn't have any. Dents are also not okay. So if your module is dented more than, say, a few thou down, it's not okay. So for example, here is a module with an ever so slight dent in it. You might not be able to see that on camera. That's okay. That's not going to cause any problems. If you can take a flat edge and put it across here and see a gap underneath it, then the dent is going to be way too deep. Other things you would want to look for is damage to the side. Now here we have the black electrical isolator here has been punctured, and also the black adhesive, that's the same black adhesive as here, has been very slightly scraped, but in this case the aluminum casing is entirely intact. I actually looked at this one with a small magnifier, and there's no damage to the actual casing. So the 2 electrical insulators, it's fine because there's nowhere, this isn't going to be near anything metal where it's going to potentially cause damage. So in this case, this is fine, but it is a case-by-case basis. So you want to check this side for damage, the bottom for damage, and then of course this side as well. Now the top, you can have quite a bit of damage to the top of this case and it not be an issue. As we'll see here in a second, there's quite a bit of stuff between the actual plastic and copper and the junction bars versus the actual cell itself. So damage like this on the top doesn't matter. Dented corners on the top, they don't matter either. And then finally, the left and right sides, the front and back of the modules, there's probably no amount of damage that would damage them because they actually have this aluminum 1/4 inch thick plate and then a steel outer plate. I don't know how you could possibly do damage from this side. If you choose to use modules that are damaged in here, just know that it could cause a thermal event. Your car could catch on fire. Lithium is very dangerous when it becomes crushed, exposed to air, etc. Proceed at your own caution if you choose not to go by these rules. Once we've cleaned the bottom of each module, we're going to apply the EPDM rubber gasket. This is an adhesive gasket that is actually a safety electrical insulator to keep the high voltage from the batteries, from these cells, from contacting the frame. So what we're going to do is we're going to take and remove the backer here, and the whole back of this is adhesive. And we're going to start, and if you'll notice here, there's a small piece of plastic that comes down there, and there's also one over there. So there's this large piece of plastic that goes across the whole thing, and then there's a smaller one right here. It's on both sides. We want to actually put the gasket just below and centered so that we cover these cells as much as possible. We don't need to cover them entirely because this is a mechanical membrane separator. This is to prevent, say, in an accident, the aluminum underneath this from crumpling up into the battery and piercing into the cell. So even though you can see the cells still on the bottom and on the top, that's totally okay. Next, we need to replace the PCB that this module comes with the custom one designed for LiBCM. So to do that, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to remove these orange covers, and there's just some plastic tabs in there. So there's 3 tabs here, and you haven't broken any at all. I've done 100 of these modules at this point. The plastic's all pretty flexible. So the next thing we're going to do is we need to remove 6 tabs. There's a total of 12, but we only need to remove 6 of them. So it'll be 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 2 on the end. So it doesn't matter which side you pick. You can pick this side or the other side. We're going to take our flathead screwdriver here, and we're going to stick it underneath and remove this first tab here. And then we're going to do the same thing. There's a tab right there. And we're going to just stick this underneath. There's 2 different pieces of plastic, so you don't want to stick it underneath the bottom piece. You want to stick it between the 2 pieces of plastic and pop those 2 tabs up. Next, we're going to take and just pop these 4, and these are really easy here. You just take your flathead and do that. 1, 2, 3, and then 4. And once you've done that, you can take and pick up the corner here and just kind of push it, and the whole thing will come apart. So next we need to take this PCB off, and I will note that this is actually low voltage, so you can touch it here and it's not going to cause problems. You don't want to be wearing metal jewelry or anything, but you don't need to be wearing high voltage insulation gloves for this part. So next we're going to take a T20, and we're going to just remove all of these screws. Now do note that these screws here are actually touching the cells, so if you accidentally short this screw out to that one, or you drop a tool on it, you could have some sparks here, because even though this is low voltage, it's extraordinarily high current. With all of the screws out, we now need to remove 2 temperature sensors. These are not reused because they can't safely be reused with LiBCM. Next up, we need to actually remove the PCB here, and to do that we're going to pull up on the PCB and then remove the tabs here. And you don't need to worry about breaking these tabs because we're going to cut them off in a second anyway. So there's one tab, here's the other. On the other side you could do the same thing, or I just kind of do that. Again, it doesn't matter if you break it off. We do not reuse that PCB, so you can just throw it away. So now what we need to do is we need to cut some of the plastic off. So if we take a look at our PCBs here, you can see that if we try and just put the PCB on right now, it doesn't fit because all of this plastic junk is in the way. So we need to cut that plastic junk off, and we need to do it on both sides of all of your modules. So here's where our flush cutters come in handy. You want flush cutters. You don't want to do this with anything else. So things to point out here. First of all, this is obviously a conductor, as is the cell underneath here. So if you at any point touch here to there with any metal tool, you're gonna get a big kaboom. We need to be very, very careful that we don't short out here to anywhere down there. Also, this is actually a vent that's on top, so it's very thin metal. So if your tool slips while you're cutting and you pierce that vent, boy, I hope you're doing this outside because you've now vented a lithium cell. It could catch on fire. So the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna take our flush cutters, we're gonna put the flush side down. So you don't want it that way, that's not flush, here's flush. So we're gonna put the flush side down and we're gonna cut this tiny little tab off right there. It interferes with the PCB. So that's 2 cuts, 1 cut here, 1 cut like that. And we'll throw that piece out. So the next thing we need to do is we need to cut this top off here. First thing we need to do is we need to cut this tab off. So we're going to take and cut the legs off flush with the bottom. So again, your flush side should be down. And we're going to just cut 1, 2, like so. And then up here, we're going to just kind of cut wherever we can. That's 3. And then we also we're going to cut the top off here. So that's going to be 1 and then 2 cuts like so. Make sure you're not pushing down again because if this tool goes into that vent, it's going to puncture it. And now you've opened your vent, you've ruined your module, and hopefully you're running away. So next up, we need to cut the back half of this crown off. So to do that, we're gonna do the easy cut first. And this is gonna be taking our flush cutters, inserting them here. And you can actually see, if you look down here, you'll see a serial number. You have a little bit of room there, but again, you don't want your tool to pierce through that. So we're gonna take this in here like this, and then we're gonna just do that. You don't need to go all the way back, you just need to get a majority of the way down. Here comes the real fun one. We need to cut this left side, and again, if you contact this metal to that metal, it's gonna go kaboom. So don't do that. So we are gonna be contacting the upper piece, there's really no avoiding that. You need to make sure this bottom leg does not touch the top of the cell. You have quite a bit of room to prevent that from happening, but just be real careful. Now that we've done that, we're gonna actually take and break this tab off. So the way I'm doing that is with a needle nose plier, and I'm gonna grab, and you'll see there's a second lip here that if you want, you can just cut this lip off. It'll make the effort a little bit easier. And so we'll go ahead and cut it off the first time. I don't actually do that. I'll show you how to do it later. So now we're gonna take our needle nose, we're gonna stick it in there. And in this case, because we're not contacting here, it's okay to touch the bottom, but again, you don't want to puncture that cell. You don't need to get close to the cell, so don't. Now we're going to take it and grab it, and I'm going to just fold it up until the plastic breaks off. So let's go over to the other side, which is exactly the same, just mirrored. And we're going to do the same thing. We're going to cut that. In that case, one of them was already cut and or broken. Next, we're going to cut our bottom feet off here, flush. They do need to be flush. 1, 2, and then again over here, we're gonna just cut high, and then we're gonna cut 1, 2, like so. And then here again, we're going to take and put our flush cutter in, cut there, come over here. One thing I've noticed, if you take these screws off, it makes it a little easier. You don't have to, but so sometimes it won't cut just because these flush cutters get a little overloaded. In that case, just pull it back a little bit. Again, you don't need to break it all the way back. I'll show you here in a second. So on this side, I'm not gonna break the tab off first. If you remember previously, I went here and I cut this tab off. What I'm doing instead, just for speed, is I take this and I just crush the tab off. So you can see the tab is now broken. And then I put the tool back in and I just rip up like that. Before I show the whole thing, I just wanna show a little thing here. We need to do one more thing on each module. When you go to put this PCB on, you'll notice that it won't seat. And that's because whichever side this connector is on, either this side or the other side over there, we need to cut this little piece of plastic off right here. Now to do that, I take my flush cutter, and again, if you short this metal to that metal, kaboomo. So don't do that. So I'm gonna take and I'm gonna rest the right leg of this flush cutter on top of this plastic here, like that. And then I'm going to take this and just cut like that. And here is where you might want tweezers to pick the debris off here, like so. So we do need to make sure that this is flush. All of these cuts are flush here. And then we will take and put our PCB on here, and I'll show this zoomed out in a second, but I just want to show you that now the connector fits. Now that we've removed the plastic on all of our modules, we need to populate the PCBs. PCBs say this side away from cells, so you're going to put that side away from the cells. And then the PCBs have a cutout in them, and the cutout is for these terminals here. So this is the correct orientation. Now we do need to make sure that the connector is on the side where we cut the additional piece of plastic off. So you'll see here that I've cut this last little piece of plastic off where the connector is. So this is the correct PCB for this module here. You can see on this side, the plastic is still there. The way that I'm aligning this here is I'm taking this hole right here and I'm putting it on this plastic tab, like that. One thing you'll find is that this connector here needs to be positioned properly so that it goes down. So we need to actually push the PCB kind of that direction to get the connector to come down there. And once we've done that, we'll just reinstall all of the screws. I strongly recommend that you start by hand to put these screws in. Remember to be really careful on these two screws here on each side that are very, very close together. Okay, now that we have all the screws threaded, we will take our drill and put it on a very low setting. On a DeWalt, I'm using the second setting, and we will tighten all of the screws. Again, you want to make sure that the connector is all the way down, and for that reason I recommend you start at the screw closest to that connector so you can make sure that it is all the way down. Okay, and finally we're going to take and reinstall the cover. And to do it, I like to take and put one corner. I basically set it down and then I slide it back, and then I go over to the opposite corner here and snap it down. And that way all of our tabs get lined up properly. I find that these tops, if you don't do it that way, tend to not align well. So we've now changed the internals. Next we're going to apply the labels. So what we're going to do is on the top here I just have kind of a master set. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our 4 or 5 modules and we're going to just line them up until, find out where each one is going to go. So this one, for example, I have a negative here and I've matched the negative here and the connector is on that side. So there's one module. And then this one is also a negative with the connector on this side. So here is our negative, connector is there. And then let's grab another one. Do we have another one that's a negative? Yep. So once again, we have a negative with the connector over there. And then now we're going to need two where the connector is on the positive side. So here's one with the connector on the positive side. Positive connector. So if you have a 48S, this is all you'll have. But if you're doing 60S, then you'll have one more of these. So what you'll want is, I have the first 3 modules here are negative with the connector here, positive with the connector here, and then negative with the connector here. And then you'll have one with the negative connector over there, connector side. And then if you're using 60S, you'll have one with a positive connector over there. So make sure you get this right, because if you do this wrong, then the labels are going to be all put in the wrong spot and things are going to fall apart when you try to put this in your car. Now we need to actually put the labels on, and the labels are going to come in a bag here. And there's a lot of them. Before we do that, we need to clean this top surface off on all these modules, again with rubbing alcohol, so that these labels will stick. We're going to just take these labels. The first thing we'll do is take this danger high voltage label here, make sure that the top surfaces have dried and flashed off. So we're going to take this label and we're going to just apply it right here. This is just so that if anyone comes in looking later on, they'll know that this is high voltage. So we're going to go ahead and apply all these labels here. So that's going to be upper, middle, lower middle. This is where these will be installed in the car. So we have upper front, which is there, upper rear. Again, this is only for 60S. So if you don't have that, all those stickers you can just kind of throw them away. Lower front. So we'll go ahead and install all of these stickers. All right, next we're gonna go ahead and add these R, which is saying this is on the right side, the passenger side of the car. This will be helpful later as well. I promise they're all helpful. We're gonna just stick these all on the right side of each module. Next, we're gonna take and mark the BMS sense leads. This is gonna allow LiBCM to measure all 48 or all 60 cells. So we have 1 through 12, cells 13 through 24, 25 through 36, 37 through 48, and if you're doing 5 modules, then we'll have cells 49 through 60. You'll notice that of the 2 we have here, these are all duplicates. We're gonna just set one aside, we'll use it later. And then there's a smaller one here, we're gonna just cut that in half, and we'll use the other one later as well. So we'll start with this small one. And we're gonna put that on module 4 positive. And what this one says is that on a 48S configuration, this is the HVDC plus, this is the pack positive. But on a 60S, because we have this extra module, this is actually just 4 plus. So now we'll label the other terminals, and we have HVDC negative here. This is gonna go to the junction board. And then the other side is going to be 1 positive, which hooks up to 2 negative. And then the other side of that is 2 positive, which hooks up to 3 negative. And then 3 positive actually goes to the junction board switch. So this one will say that one goes to the switch. Because again, these are to tell us kind of what is hooking up where. And then 4 negative is actually the fuse. So it's going to come back from the junction board fuse. We've already done the 4 positive. And then we have, if you have the 60S configuration, we have 5 negative. And then finally, HVDC plus. On the 60S configuration, we're going to take and cut the left side off of 6 of these covers and the right side off of 4 of these covers. If you're using the 48S configuration, then you'll do the same thing, but this time you'll only cut the left side off of 5 covers and the right side off of 3 of the covers. So we're doing a 60S configuration, so we're going to take our razor blade here, and first we will cut the left side off of 6 of these. So here are the 6 where we've cut the left side off of. And now we'll cut the right side off of these 4. And then because the original battery uses a bus bar, whereas we're using a cable, we need to actually cut this off as well so that the cable has clearance, and that's going to be on all of them. So we'll basically take, and I tilt these backwards here, and I'm just going to cut all the way down, like so, and then come and cut this corner off. So you'll do this to all 8 or 10 of them. Okay, so now these are modified, and all we need to do is clean them off. And now we will add our stickers, and once again, if you're using the 60S configuration, you'll have these 2, and if you're using the 48S, you'll only have that. So we have these labels we set aside earlier, and so we'll just attach them all. Okay, and so the battery terminals are all labeled, and we will actually just set these aside for now. We will put them on after we've installed each module.